The shop owner had made his decision, and he was not going to change it. That was clear from the first 30 seconds of the exchange, from the way he stood behind the counter, from the way his arms were positioned, from the particular quality of his voice when he explained, for the second time, that the guitar hanging in the window was not for sale to the young man standing in front of him. Not because the guitar was not for sale. The guitar was for sale. It had a price tag on it, which made it for sale by definition. It was not for sale to this specific young man, for reasons that the shop owner was not fully articulating, but that were present in the room in the specific way that unspoken things are present, felt by everyone, named by no one. The young man's name was Marcus Webb. He was 17 years old. He had come into the guitar shop on South Street in Philadelphia on a Saturday afternoon in July 1978 with $45 in his pocket. Money he had saved from 3 months of cutting lawns at his neighborhood, which was a neighborhood in West Philadelphia where the lawns were not large and the fees were not significant, and the accumulation of $45 had therefore taken the time it had taken. He had kept the money in a shoebox on the shelf in his closet, adding to it each week with the specific discipline of someone who has a destination in mind and is not going to be diverted from it by the ordinary demands on a 17-year-old's money, which were considerable and various, and mostly not the shoebox on the shelf. He had wanted to play guitar since he was 14, when his mother had put a record on in the living room on a Sunday afternoon, a Muddy Waters record that belonged to his uncle, left at their house after a visit, found on the shelf and played on impulse. And the sound of the guitar had reached him in the specific way that sounds reach certain people and do not let go. He had not had access to a guitar. His family did not have the kind of money that produced instruments, and the school he attended had a music program that included wind instruments and percussion, and did not include guitar. And the distance between wanting a guitar and having one was the distance between his current reality and a future he was working toward, which was the shoebox on the shelf. He had come specifically for the guitar in the window, which he had seen 2 weeks earlier on a walk he took that passed the shop, and which he had stopped in front of for several minutes, and which he had gone home and thought about and saved his last $11 for, so that he would have more than the price, because he had learned from experience that having more than the price was a form of security against the unpredictable ways that transactions could go wrong. The guitar was a 1966 Harmony Sovereign, not a valuable guitar by any collector's standard, a student guitar, a beginner's instrument, the kind of thing a shop owner acquires in lots and sells for a modest profit to the people who need something to learn on before they can afford something worth learning on. Its price tag said $40. Marcus Webb had $45. He had come into the shop, he had pointed to the guitar, he had been shown the price, and then something had shifted in the shop owner's demeanor. A small shift, the kind that you might not notice if you were not the person it was directed at, that Marcus Webb noticed immediately because he had been noticing that kind of shift his entire life. The shop owner said, "That one's actually not available." Marcus said, "It says $40 on the tag." The shop owner said, "I know what it says. I'm telling you it's not available." Marcus said, "I have the $40. I have more than $40. The shop owner said, "I heard you." There was a man in the back of the shop who had been looking at a rack of guitar strings for the past 5 minutes without appearing to have made any progress toward selecting a set. He was 28 years old, and he was wearing jeans and a flannel shirt and work boots, the clothes of someone who is not trying to look like anything in particular, the clothes of someone for whom appearance is a neutral fact rather than a statement. He had come into the shop for guitar strings, which was a routine errand, the kind of thing that brings musicians into guitar shops on Saturday afternoons, regardless of who they are. He had been half listening to the exchange at the counter with the increasing attention of someone who has recognized what they are hearing and is deciding what to do about it. The decision took approximately 30 seconds. He put down the string set he had been holding. He walked to the counter. He did not approach it with the body language of someone who is about to make a scene. He walked with the easy directness of someone who is going to say what needs to be said without drama, without performance, without the self-consciousness of a person who wants credit for what they are about to do. He stood next to Marcus Webb. He looked at the shop owner. He said, "I'm sorry, I couldn't help overhearing. What seems to be the problem with the guitar?" The shop owner looked at him. He said, "It's a private matter." The man said, "The kid has the money. The tag says $40. That seems like a pretty straightforward transaction to me." The shop owner said, "I don't think this concerns you." The man said, "I'm a customer in your shop. I think it concerns me a little." He said, "Can I see the guitar?" The shop owner looked at him for a moment, the look of someone calculating something, running the situation through whatever system of assessment he used, arriving at a conclusion that did not improve his position, but that he did not have an immediate means of avoiding. He reached into the window display and took out the Harmony Sovereign and set it on the counter. The man picked it up. He turned it over, examined the back, ran his left thumb along the neck with the specific attention of someone checking action and fret height, someone who has been doing this with guitars for long enough that the assessment is automatic and takes approximately 3 seconds and is complete. He played a chord. He played another. The guitar was not in perfect condition. The action was slightly high, and one of the tuning machines was sticky. But it was a real instrument, something a person could learn on, something that would hold tune and respond to being played, and carry a person from nowhere to somewhere on the map of what music required. He set the guitar back on the counter. He said, "I'll take it." The shop owner said, "I beg your pardon?" He said, "I'll buy the guitar. $40, right?" He reached into his pocket and put 2 20s on the counter, without ceremony, the way you put money down when the transaction is simple and the question of whether to complete it has already been answered. The shop owner looked at the money. He looked at the man. He picked up the bills. The man picked up the guitar and turned to Marcus Webb. He held it out. He said, "Here." Marcus Webb looked at him. He said, "I don't understand." The man said, "I just bought you a guitar." He said, "Do you have a case?" Marcus said, "No." The man turned back to the counter. He said, "Does he get a case with this?" The shop owner, whose expression had moved through several phases in the past 2 minutes and had arrived at something between embarrassment and the particular discomfort of someone who has been made to see something they would rather not have seen, found a soft case under the counter and put it on top. The man put the guitar in the case. He handed the case to Marcus Webb. He said, "Learn something good." Marcus Webb stood in the guitar shop on South Street with a guitar case in his hand and looked at the man who had just bought it for him. He said, "Who are you?" The man said, "Just someone who was in the right place." He went back to the string rack. He selected a set of D'Addario lights. He brought them to the counter and paid for them. He left. Marcus Webb went home with his guitar. It was only later that day, when Marcus told the story to his older brother, who told it to a friend, who asked questions about the description of the man, the age, the look, the flannel shirt, and the work boots, and the South Street location on that particular July Saturday, that the pieces assembled themselves into a shape that Marcus Webb was not entirely prepared for. His brother said, "Are you sure about what he looked like?" Marcus described him again. His brother said, "Marcus, that was Bruce Springsteen." Marcus Webb sat with this information for a moment. Bruce Springsteen was not yet the person he would become. The Born in the USA era, the stadium tours, the magazine covers, the cultural phenomenon, but he was already someone. Darkness on the Edge of Town had come out 6 weeks earlier. He was a New Jersey musician with a devoted following on the East Coast. Someone whose name was known to people who cared about rock and roll in Philadelphia in the summer of 1978. Marcus said, "You're sure?" His brother said, "Flannel shirt, work boots, South Street, July 1978. How many other people does that describe who would buy a stranger a guitar in a music shop?" Marcus Webb learned to play the Harmony Sovereign. He practiced in his bedroom and in the basement and on the steps outside his house in West Philadelphia in the evenings, the way people practice when they have no teacher and are using the music as the instruction manual for itself. He sat with records and played along. Muddy Waters first, because that was where it had started. And then the other things that led from muddy waters, the way one open door leads to another. B.B. King and Albert King, and then further into the territory that those voices pointed toward, Chuck Berry and Little Richard and the whole lineage of it, the architecture of the music that had become, for Marcus Webb, the framework around which the rest of his life was organizing itself. He learned the chords, and then the progressions, and then the specific way the progressions connected to each other, the grammar of it, the syntax, and then the thing that took longest, which was learning to hear what the music was trying to do rather than what he was trying to make it do, learning to be in service of the song rather than in control of it, learning the specific humility that good playing requires, and that bad playing never develops, because bad playing is always about the player rather than the music. He practiced 3 hours a day for 2 years. He practiced on the Harmony Sovereign with its high action and its sticky tuning machine, and its soft case that had been intended for a different guitar, and that closed imperfectly because the proportions were slightly wrong. He practiced until his fingertips were permanently calloused, and until the psalms he was learning were in his hands rather than in his head, and until the distance between hearing something and being able to play it had closed from weeks to hours to sometimes just the time it took to work out the chord shapes. He played his first show when he was 19. It was a block party in his neighborhood, on a flatbed truck that someone had backed into the street, with a sound system that was optimistic about its own capabilities, and an audience of maybe 200 people who were there for the party and treated the music as part of the party rather than the reason for it, which was the correct proportion for where Marcus Webb was in his development, and the right kind of room to start in. He was nervous and played slightly faster than the songs required, and made 2 chord changes late in the second song that he had never made in practice. And the 200 people who were there for the party did not notice any of this, and he kept going. He kept going. He kept playing. The Harmony Sovereign eventually gave way to better instruments as his playing developed, and the money from gigs allowed him to invest in the tools that the playing required. But he kept the Harmony Sovereign. It lived in its soft case in the corner of every room he lived in through his 20s and 30s, and he took it out occasionally, not to play it. The action was too high for regular playing, and he had never had it set up, had chosen to leave it as it was, but to hold it, to feel the weight of it, to remember. He became, over the course of the 15 years after the guitar shop on South Street, a musician of the kind that cities produce and sustain without ever making famous. The musician that other musicians call when they need someone who can play anything, who shows up on time, who understands what the song requires and does not impose on it. He played sessions. He played in bands. He played in the background of records that other people put their names on, and that Marcus Webb's contribution made sound better than they would have sounded without him. In 1993, he got a letter. It had been forwarded through a music publisher he had done session work for, and it had taken several weeks to reach him because the address it had been sent to was an old one, and it had been passed along through 2 or 3 intermediaries before it arrived in his mailbox. The envelope had no return address. Inside was a single index card with a handwritten note. The note said, "I heard you've been playing. Good. Keep going." B. Marcus Webb kept the index card in his wallet for the next 12 years until the wallet wore out and he transferred it to a new one. And then he kept it in the new wallet for another decade until he finally had it laminated because the paper was becoming fragile from the handling. He has been asked, over the years, to tell the story of that Saturday in July 1978. He tells it the way he tells stories, with the particular patience of someone who understands that the point of a story is not the ending, but the accumulation of everything that leads to it, the specific details that make it real rather than representative. He always ends it the same way. He says, "A man in a flannel shirt bought me a $40 guitar and told me to learn something good. I've been trying to learn something good ever since. He says, I never thanked him. I didn't know who he was until it was too late to go back. So I've tried to say thank you the only way I know how, which is to keep playing. He says, if you're out there and you remember a guitar shop on South Street and a Saturday in July, this is me saying thank you. This is 30 years of thank you played on the instrument you put in my hands. That is the story of the man who stepped in, not with a speech or a confrontation, not with the drama of a public gesture or the self-announcement of someone who wants credit for what they did. He stepped in quietly, bought a guitar, handed it to a boy he had never met, and told him to learn something good. And then he went back to looking at guitar strings. That is who Bruce Springsteen is. That is who he has always been. The man who sees what is happening and steps in, not because he needs to be seen stepping in, but because the stepping in is the right thing, and the right thing is the only thing. If this story moved you, please subscribe and leave a comment. Tell us about the person who stepped in for you when you needed it, who may never have known what that moment meant. Share this with someone who has ever been told they cannot have the thing they came for. Hit the bell, because we have more stories from the moments when one person's choice changed everything for another. This was one of those moments, one of the simplest, one of the most permanent.